When I became a wife and homemaker, the question of what's for dinner suddenly became my responsibility. This was very jarring at first. I'd never really considered what it was like to bear the privilege and responsibility of feeding and nourishing a family on a day-to-day basis. It quickly gave me a new respect for the hands that had fed me over the years.
Hey, welcome back to Reflecting Redemption. I am so excited to bring you a video this week with some meal inspiration. I've got some fun cooking going on in the kitchen and it's very wintry and comforting, and I wanted to share with you 3 meals that I'm doing. So I'm gonna just share how I prep it all up and get everything ready and walk you through all the steps. All the recipes will be linked in the description box, and go ahead and give this a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope you enjoy these recipes.
After my initial shell shock and a bit of trial and error, I've come to love my role in the kitchen. In fact, my very favorite thing about being a homemaker is the time that I get to spend in the kitchen. So the first meal I'm showing you today is this sausage, cabbage, and potato bake. It's very simple. You start with a head of cabbage, you cut it up into the size pieces that you like, you line a greased dish with it on the bottom, and you liberally season it with olive oil, seasoned salt and pepper, and then you proceed to layer potatoes on top of that, and you put olive oil and your seasonings on top of the potatoes as well. And then you add onions if you like them. I add it to half because my husband's not a giant fan of big chunks of onion, but he does like smaller pieces and he likes the flavor. So depending on your preferences, you olive oil that layer as well and season it a little more lightly. You've got to be a little bit careful. And then that could be a side dish on its own, but if you want to make it a full meal, you can add some kielbasa or some steak or even some grilled chicken at the end. But I'm doing kielbasa tonight, and you're going to put it in the oven covered at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes. Serve it up with some corn and it's perfect. Next, we have my mother-in-law's way of cooking pot roast, and it is the best way to cook a beef roast that I found. What you're gonna need is a day at home where you can watch it and kind of babysit it. So essentially you're gonna cover the roast with water and add a couple of tablespoons of salt to it. Then you're going to turn the oven on high and let it come to a rolling boil. What's gonna happen when you get it to that rolling boil is some of the skim is going to rise up to the top where the fat is rendering, and you're gonna want to skim it off and take all of that away, put it in a bowl, and then you'll have a clean, clear broth left for your roast to essentially stew in all day and slowly become very tender and flavorful. So as you watch it throughout the day, you want to turn it down to low for a nice simmer, and you want to make sure it stays covered with water, so add water as you need, but be careful adding too much salt because you might make it too salty. So I usually add water and I don't add salt again until the very end when I've tasted it. You can see how tender it is, and at this point I just take it and shred it up with my hands or my stand mixer, and then I will package it up in some freezer bags that I can use on a different day. So I also save the broth because it's too delicious not to, and it makes the perfect beef stew, and whenever you need beef broth, it works great. So here are my bags of roasts, and I will use those in a bit. Another recipe that I've snagged from my mother-in-law is what we all just lovingly refer to as homemade soup. It is simple and delicious and so comforting. What you do is take hamburger meat, and I like to just take mine in big pieces and lay it in the bottom of the pot because I like a bigger chunk of the meat in the soup, and I don't want it to be too small. And then you're gonna dice an onion up and add it to that and let everything render. Let the hamburger meat get good and brown, and let the onion get nice and soft. I mentioned that my husband doesn't like onion, but if it's nice and soft, he does like it that way. So I'm gonna add that, some salt and pepper, and let everything render. I'm also going to peel some potatoes. I think for our family, I'm peeling about 6. These, as you can see, they have been going through the winter. They're starting to get a little bit of an eye on them, but we're still using them. They're gonna be just fine. So I rinse them off and chop them into pieces that we like for bite size for our soup. And then I add the potatoes to the hamburger meat and the onion that I have drained after it's been cooked. And I want to saute these just a little bit to get a bit of color and flavor. I'm going to salt and pepper, and here is where I add my favorite spices. As usual, I use paprika, onion powder, garlic powder, salt, and pepper. That's usually the 5 seasonings that I'm pulling out for just about everything. But after I've seasoned it and got a little bit of color on the potatoes, I'm going to add a jar. This is a quart jar of home canned tomato juice. Of course, you can buy store-bought tomato juice as well, and you can tweak this and make it your own. And then after that, I'm going to go ahead and add a quart of water to the soup as well. The potatoes are not fully cooked at this point. I'm going to add a couple of chicken bouillon cubes and some brown sugar. A 1/4 cup is what I'm adding, and that is my favorite thing to add when I'm using tomato juice or any sort of tomatoes. A bit of brown sugar goes a long way. I brought it to a boil. I'm going to reduce it to a simmer and cover it with the lid and let it simmer for just a few minutes and check the potatoes as we go. You don't want them to get too soft. I forgot to record it that night, but we did have it left over to the next day with a piece of bread, and it was just as delicious as the night we had it, almost even more. As it sits, it gets better. And the last thing I want to show you is Alice Springs chicken. This recipe originates from Outback Steakhouse, I believe, and everybody probably has their own way of doing it, but it's a really great way to eat chicken. First thing, I'm prepping up some fresh bacon. You can use any type of bacon, obviously, but we have some fresh bacon that I've marinated, so I'm cooking that in the oven. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut my chicken up into tenders so that I can get them marinating as well. A marinade goes a long way. I'm not really gonna share how I marinate my bacon because most people just use store-bought, and there's ways online that you can look up because I'm still kind of perfecting that, but we really like it. So to the chicken, I'm adding salt, pepper, paprika, garlic powder, onion powder, and then honey mustard. I use Great Value, but you can use whatever kind you want, and also some water to let it marinate. Then I'm gonna make green beans with honey and bacon and olive oil and bake those off while I fry up my honey mustard chicken tenders in a pan on the stovetop. I'm also making some mac and cheese out of a package to go with this because not everything can be made from scratch, and we really enjoy it. So I've got that going over there while I'm watching my chicken tenders. You just want to get them nice and brown, give them a good flip, and let them get cooked through. And then you're going to add cheddar cheese and mozzarella cheese to the top and let it sit until it gets nice and soft and spreads everywhere. Then you'll add bacon on top of that. And now it's time to serve it up. This is one of my family's favorite meals, and we love to have it left over as well. But it all gets really nice and cooked together with that honey mustard and the cheese. It makes a nice sauce on it, and it's one of our favorite things to have. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm gonna finish serving up these meals. I know I said I only had 3, but I actually had 4. The roast beef was more just how to make the roast on the stovetop, but the others were actual meals you can use. So I hope you enjoyed them. Like this video if you liked it, and I will catch you again next week for another Homemaking 101. I hope these encourage you and give you some inspiration for your homemaking. See you next time. Bye.